Hi, this is Craig Stocks here at Utah Desert Remote Observatories. You can find us online at utahdesertremote.com. And today we're going to work with this image of the Lagoon Nebula, and we're going to focus on color mapping in Photoshop. So this is a version I've already been playing with, and if I turn off the RGB layer group, this is a narrowband interpretation, and that's really what we want to focus on today because there are lots of different ways that you can interpret narrowband data. So let's just start fresh. So what I'm going to do is go to File, Scripts, Load Files into Stack. And that brings up this dialog box where we can browse for the files that we want to open, and Photoshop will open those as layers. And I'm going to open the sulfur, oxygen, hydrogen. This is a darker version of the oxygen, and then the RGB and the RGB stars. Click OK, and then click OK again to open those files. And we can use the RGB image as a color reference if we want. Sometimes it's helpful to kind of keep you on target. The nice thing about Nebula, I believe, is it gives you a lot of flexibility in how you color map and a lot of creative freedom. Galaxies, for the most part, have to look like the galaxy that we're used to looking at. Where once you are working with nebulae and narrowband especially, I think you have a lot more freedom in how you do the color mapping. So these are the layers that we just opened, and the first thing I'm going to do is some housekeeping. I'm going to grab the stars layer, bring it up to the top. I want to put it in a layer group by itself, so I'm going to just tap Control G, that would be Command G on a Mac, and that will put the currently selected layer into a layer group. And I'll just change the name to stars. And we'll just turn this off for now. Next we have the sulfur, and I'm going to do the same thing. Control G, change the name to sulfur. And I'm going to drop a levels adjustment layer inside the group, and I'm currently on the group name. That's the currently selected item in the layers palette. So if I add a levels adjustment layer, by default it will add it inside that layer group since the layer group is open. And I'm pretty sure we're going to want to darken the darks and maybe darken the midtones a little bit. Maybe something like that. This is a non-destructive workflow, so we can always come back and change this whenever we want. This is the oxygen, and again I will Control G, change the name to oxygen, and I believe I have another version of the oxygen with the that is probably a little darker also. So I'm going to pull that up into the oxygen. Yeah, in this one the center is darker, and it may be too dark. So we might look for a blend of these, or we'll use the darker one for the core, and yeah, we'll use the lighter one for the outside areas. So that would be the lighter one, and then we're going to use the darker one for the core, and I'm going to put this in darken blending mode. And now I'm going to add a layer mask, and this is a crude way to do it, but it's easy to understand. I'm just going to grab the brush tool at 100% opacity and 100% flow, and just make the brush nice and big using the right bracket key. And what I'm going to do is paint out all the areas where I don't want to use this dark layer. I want the lighter area to shine through in the background. So I'm going to just paint black on the layer mask around the perimeter. And you can even see on the layer thumbnail where I've painted. And that gives us a more uniform oxygen layer where we have a little bit more detail in the core. So now I'll turn that layer off. This is the hydrogen, so Control G, change the name. And then last at the, again, I'll drop a levels adjustment layer in here because I'm pretty sure we'll be adjusting this. And last is the RGB layer. Again, I'll put that into a layer group. I'll drop in a levels adjustment layer and probably a color balance. I think I want to adjust the color balance a little bit so that it's a little bit less magenta. And again, we'll darken the... You can see in the RGB data, we just don't have as much of the detail in the extents around the nebula. If I turn the stars on, though, let's put this in screen blending mode so that we can see through it. So there's the stars, there's the nebula underneath it, and just a nice RGB image of the Lagoon Nebula. I feel like it's upside down, so I'm just going to go to image rotation, and rotate it 180 degrees. I think this is a more natural way of looking at it, at least in the northern hemisphere. But we really want to talk about color mapping. There are a lot of different ways to color map, and some of it depends on whether you want a very natural look, which you could use an SHO color palette, and that would be a very natural look on the Lagoon Nebula. You can also use SHO, pretty much any color palette you want. But the two most common are probably going to be HOO and then SHO. So let's start with HOO. And I'm going to do something that makes color mapping extremely easy. To start with, I'm going to just go ahead and turn off this RGB group so that you can see that it's not included in the data at all. I'll turn on the hydrogen, and just for clarity, I'm going to turn off the stars. So this looks like a black and white, or what is frequently called a grayscale image, but it's not grayscale. It is a color image, and we see it as black and white because the red, green, and blue values are all equal everywhere in this image. Every pixel has 3 values, a red, a green, and a blue. And for every pixel, the red, green, and blue are all equal. And if we look at the channels palette, we can see that there actually is a red channel, a green channel, and a blue channel, and those are all look equal. So we know this consists of red, green, and blue, and if I turn on the oxygen layer, it likewise consists of red, green, and blue. And I'm going to go ahead and darken this just a touch more. So if we want to make this into an HOO image, then for oxygen, all we want is the green and blue. We don't really care about red from this layer group. The easy way to do that, I'm going to double click to the right of the layer name on the layer group. And that's going to open the advanced blending options. And since this is an RGB image, you can see that there's a check mark for each layer, red, green, and blue. If I want this to be an HOO image, I don't want red from the oxygen channel. I only want green and blue. So I can simply turn off the red, click OK. And now we have an HOO image. And it's just that easy. This is the hydrogen, this is the oxygen. We may want to play with the brightness a little bit to get a better balance. And this is just in this layer group. I haven't done anything with the blending mode. It's still just in its default pass-through blending mode. And I'm going to put since I put this levels adjustment above the others, this will be kind of a global adjustment for the oxygen. We can make it brighter or dimmer, whatever we want. This was without this darkening layer, and maybe we want to cut back on the opacity a little bit of that darkening layer. And This isn't a great result, but this is an intermediate result. And if we compare this to the RGB, and I'm going to just move the RGB up to the top so that we can easily view it. This was the RGB, this is the HOO. So it's similar to the RGB, only with more detail than we captured in RGB. So that's a way to quickly create an HOO image. And if I wanted to make any global adjustments, and I typically will, I'm going to add a levels adjustment, and then a color balance, and a hue saturation. And those are the three that I would almost always add above the base layers where the picture resides and below the stars. And then with this we can do a kind of an overall brightness adjustment if needed. We can do an overall color balance if we feel like it's warranted to get a little bit better white balance. I may want to increase the color saturation. So there's our HOO image, and again that compares to the RGB. Looks like we might even want to darken this a little bit. So let's say that's our HOO image, and again compared to RGB. All we did to do this was we've got a hydrogen layer, that's the hydrogen layer, and an oxygen layer, and we simply turned off the red channel in the oxygen layer. So what if we want an SHO image? And I'm going to show you two ways to do it, and I think it depends on the data. I think the first way I'm going to show you is the preferred way. From a little bit of testing I've done, I think you get more dynamic detail and more dynamic color this way. And then I'll show you the other way that you will have to use in some cases. And I may show you the approach that a lot of people use. In fact, let's do that one first. So I'm going to just reset this oxygen layer to red, green, and blue. So now we have an oxygen layer group, we have a hydrogen layer group, and we have a sulfur layer group. And these are all in just normal blending mode, or in the case of a layer group, the default is pass-through rather than normal. So the way you'll see a lot of people approach colorizing is using hue saturation layers to set the color, and then screen blending mode. And to make that work, we actually have to have a black background to start with. So I'm just going to add a solid color fill layer, and I'm going to fill it with black, and we're going to put it at the very bottom of the layer stack. And then I'll open each one of these layer groups, and at the very top of the layer group I'm going to add a hue saturation layer, and I'm going to use this checkbox that says colorize. So if we click that, what this does is colorize the contents of this layer. This is hydrogen, so we want it to be red, and typically you would drag the saturation all the way up and then the darkness back down, trying to get the black areas to not have a red tint. And these are adjustment layers, so we can change these anytime we want. Next, you would go to oxygen. We'll do the same thing. We'll add a hue saturation, click colorize, take the saturation all the way over. This is going to be blue. And we'll darken it a little bit. And this we want to put, in fact, both of these we want to put in screen blending mode. So that was the hydrogen, here's the oxygen in screen blending mode. And once you get it in screen blending mode, you get a better feeling for what the brightness needs to be. And then last, we'll come to the sulfur. We'll put it in screen blending mode. we'll add our hue saturation, sulfur, and actually for SHO I did the hydrogen wrong. We want sulfur to be red. We'll darken it down. And we want hydrogen for an SHO image to be green. So I'll just move this slider to green. And that gives us an SHO color palette. And then you would fine-tune this two different ways, or a couple different ways. We can fine-tune it by changing the lightness contribution from each individual layer. And we do that just on the hue saturation. So that looks pretty good. I think you can also adjust the brightness by changing the levels adjustment. So that's the way a lot of people will approach color mapping. I feel like I don't get as much detail this way as I do the way I'm going to show you now. This isn't a bad way, and I use this technique quite a bit, but I use it typically, well, you'll see when we get to natural art, SHO. So let's just undo this. So I'm going to put these back into, in fact, before I do that, let's grab a copy of this. So I'm just going to come to the top layer that's active, and I'm going to make a stamp visible, something that I don't normally do, but Shift Control Alternate E, and that will make a new copy or a stamped layer of everything that was visible. And we'll just drag that up under the stars and turn it off for now. So we'll just save that for reference. So now I want to put these back in normal blending mode, or actually pass through, and turn off, well, in fact, we'll just delete this hue saturation layer and get it out of the way. So now our sulfur is back to just grayscale. Pass through, and we'll delete the hue saturation there. Hydrogen goes back to pass through, and delete the hue saturation. So now we're back to just 3 grayscale or monochrome images. As I said before, hydrogen is putting out all colors, and like we did before to make the HOO image, we just turned off the red of oxygen. Let's turn off, if we want this to be an SHO image, let's turn off red and green. So the oxygen layer now is contributing only blue. And then we'll go to the sulfur layer, and we'll do the same thing, double click, and we'll turn off everything but red. So now sulfur is red, oxygen is green, and hydrogen is whatever's left over, which happens to be, oxygen is blue, hydrogen is green. And if you compare this to the one I did with the screen layers, I feel like this retains more texture and more color depth. And then again, I would fine tune this. If we want to add more red, I would come to the sulfur, which is red, increase its brightness, and increasing the brightness of the sulfur brightens the red. We might need to do something with green, maybe darken the green background a little bit, and then we might want to play with the blue a little. We could put a touch more blue in here. And I'm going to come back up and take a little bit more red out of the surroundings. Let's say something like that. I'll throw a little bit more blue into the center, and we'll darken the green in the center. So I feel like this gives me a better starting point because each layer is just in its normal blending mode. it really gives us a true SHO with all of the details. And then typically I would need to add the same global adjustments that we looked at before. Once you get it close, we might want to adjust the color balance here. We can also adjust the hue saturation if we want. And most of these tools have channels selectors as well. So for instance, if I want to play with just the red, I can target just the red in the hue saturation and then play with just the red saturation if I want. I can target the cyans, which is going to be the center part here, and I can shift it to be more blue. And I could have done this with the other one as well. These little sliders show the extent. So right now we have cyan selected. If I click in between these two sliders, I can make this choose even more blue colors. So this is a more or less traditional SHO. We might want to take a little bit more of the, well, we want to be careful. I don't want to take out too much of the hydrogen. So this is a traditional SHO, and you can continue to play with this and try to optimize it. The next thing I want to do is look at what I consider a natural SHO. This is nice because it brings out a lot of different colors and creates a lot of color contrast between the sulfur and the hydrogen, but it does create a rather unnatural looking result compared to, for instance, the RGB image. So let's look at natural SHO. And I do this is going to be a little bit different. First we'll turn off the RGB and turn off these adjustment layers. And to do this, I'm going to start by putting sulfur at the very bottom. And right now it is set to just red. I'm going to go ahead and make it green and blue. So it's a monochrome image with all of the colors. Now I'm going to go to the hydrogen layer. And much like we did before, I'm going to double click. And this time I'm going to turn off just the red layer. And this gives us now an SOO image where we're getting red from sulfur. And then we're getting green and blue from the oxygen. I did that on the wrong layer, didn't I? So I'm going to, order becomes important here. So I want oxygen. I'm going to turn off red and turn on green and blue. Turn off red. So here's our SOO image. And I'm going to do one other step here. I'm going to take some of the green out of this because green and blue makes cyan. And so I'm going to open up the oxygen layer, and at the top inside that layer group, I'm going to add a curves adjustment layer. And much like I did before, I want to target the green curve, and I'm just going to grab the top right corner and drag it down. And that takes some of the green out. Now notice it's also darkening the image. It's not just changing the color. And I only want to change the color. I don't want to darken the image. So I'm going to change this blending mode to color. And now when I take the green out, it'll just change the color without affecting the brightness of the image. Now we'll turn on the hydrogen. And this time we are going to use that hue saturation layer to add the hydrogen on top because we've already used red, green, and blue. So I'll turn on all three layers, and I'm going to set this to screen blending mode. And it will almost always be too bright, and you'll need to tone it down. But now we're going to play with the color. And so we'll add a hue saturation adjustment layer. And we're going to put it in colorize blending mode. Take our saturation up. And now and let's take the brightness down. Now we can very easily adjust how much green, red, yellow, blue we have in this hydrogen layer group by simply moving this one slider. So here we are showing both sulfur and hydrogen as red. We can start to add some yellow, so now it's kind of an orangey color. There it is as a yellow color. We can go all the way to green, cyan. We can make the hydrogen add any color we want. And then we still have, above these three groups, we still have our global adjustments, so we may need to adjust brightness overall. If I want to take some more of the green out of that center, I can come back to this oxygen curves adjustment, and this tends to be pretty iterative. Take a little more green out. Let's say something like that. So this is what I would consider a natural SHO. It's pretty natural compared to the RGB image. And just for comparison, that's RGB. This is the natural SHO. If we wanted it to look exactly the same, there would be no point shooting narrowband. So the reason to shoot narrowband is to bring out some of that differentiation in the gases. And it's nice because it lets you put a little bit of yellow and orange in where the hydrogen goes to differentiate it from the sulfur. And approaching it this way, we've got just about unlimited flexibility in how we actually color map each color. So here we've taken about half or a little more than half of the green out of the cyan that is color mapping the oxygen. And a trick you can use if you want to see what color each one of these layers is contributing, if I open up each layer and right at the very top, I'm going to grab the text tool, and with white as the color, I'm just going to click down here and I'm going to type S2. And notice that it puts it in whatever color this layer is contributing. So let's do the same thing with the O3. So that's the fully saturated color of the oxygen. And lastly, we'll add some text for the hydrogen. And actually it needs to be down here. So this is the color of the hydrogen, this is the sulfur, this is the oxygen, and these are live indicators. So if I come back up and change the color of the hydrogen, notice that the little HA symbol changes with it. So I can see exactly, there's kind of a pure green, there's more of a greenish yellow, there's more of a yellow and orange. So whatever looks good to you, you can freely adjust it. And so this one simple slider more or less becomes the color balancing tool of choice. And then when you're done, you just turn the stars on and you have a complete image. So I hope you found this useful. A couple different ways to go about color balancing. We looked at a simple HOO image. We looked at an SHO in the kind of the traditional method. And then we looked at the SHO method using what I call natural SHO, where oxygen is actually mapped as green rather than blue, and hydrogen gets mapped as a yellow or orange color rather than green. So, hope you found this useful. If you have any questions, be sure to drop those in the comments down below. And as always, I hope you have a great day today and an even better night tonight under a clear, dark sky. Thanks.